You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of truth, a dimension of freedom, a dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Well, welcome to the Capitalist Corner. Sorry for the delay. I was having tech issues that Jim and Persephone could not solve, so we're going to blame them for all the problems that we have. As usual, although I am the vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, the show is not affiliated with the party, and any views expressed here are not necessarily indicative of the party. Mark could not be here today. He had something to do. I don't remember what it is, but he did call me last night and tell me. Jim was kind enough to join us. So here we will get started. Jim, what's happening? How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Busy as all hell. I'm no Mark Pellegrino. I can hardly sub in for the mighty Mark, but
oh Lord, the sycophancy begins.
Yeah. Well, look, you have to expect the people who are right most of the time to be on the the other side when you say silly things, so
like Persephone and I are usually right, and you and Mark are usually wrong. And note, Persephone, I just lumped you in with me, so any bad ideas that I have are now going to be ascribed to you. Get ready for the hate mail.
You'll notice how easy it is for this tribalism thing to break out really quickly.
Yeah. Jim, I sent you an abundance of stuff this morning, as is my want. And the first thing I want to talk about has nothing to do with politics. It was this awful, awful article in Psychology Today magazine. Let me just find it because I want to make sure that I do it justice here. Let's see here. Jim Valliant. So the article is called "The Arrogant Ape: A Strong Case Against Human Superiority." And it's all about how we humans are too human-centric. We assume our exceptionalism. It's really just gross. I put a post today on Facebook and X, and I said the article ultimately is anti-human, anti-civilization, and anti-reason. And it reminds me, years ago, I had to write an article for a psychology class. I had to write an essay based on a book I read, and I chose this book called The Lopsided Ape. And it was all about how the human superiority has to do with a higher developed left hemisphere of the brain, which is, of course, more responsible for logic, reasoning, mathematics, that sort of thing. And the one of the things I had to address is this very idea. And I said, well, look, after all, you're not giving this assignment to a chimp, right? You're giving it to me. And the thing is the person that writes this article is assuming I think it's a woman, what she's denying, because it's quite obvious that every other species on the planet is species centric. Right. Right. So, and it's also quite obvious that none of them are thinking about it. None of them cares about it, but she wants human beings to take an enlightened, in her, from her perspective, an enlightened view, which assumes the things that she's calling into question. But it's utterly disgusting. I mean, I've seen a lot of gross stuff coming from, it has to be from left-wing, thought circles. This isn't the type of thing you'd see coming from the right. What did you think of this?
Well, what you just said there at the end is very important. We're faced with the false alternative from the religious folks who said, well, God made man special. You see, he was the climax. If you look at Genesis, right? He's the climax of creation. He's the last day of creation. Boy, that's God's triumphant final achievement. We're made in God's image. So we have this special religious, so that's one side that says we're special because God made us special. Now, I think it's, mind you, it's mysticism, but it's based on a real observation, Ancient people could see with their own eyes exactly what this scientist with their highfalutin language is denying, a basic observed reality. But the sad false alternative is that the people who are defending the uniqueness of humanity are religious people not offering rational arguments. On the other side, we've got pseudo-scientific arguments. Now, this really all began, of course, when again, religion is partly the culprit here. The earth is the center of the universe. We are the most special thing. Once we find out that the sun is at the center of the solar system and that we're just a modest solar system on the edge of the galaxy, well, we have to take down ourselves a notch here. We're humans, there's nothing special. And what they're trying to prove, let me try and find the valid motive here. They're trying to say, look, humans are an animal. We evolved on Earth. There's nothing unnatural about humans. Insofar as that's their psychological motive, I understand. And it's true. We're closely related to the apes. But boy, the difference that, they talk about the tiny bit of DNA difference between ourselves and the apes. Well, that tiny difference must make a huge difference, because it's quite obvious. They're not the ones writing psychology papers, symphonies, operas. They're not going to the moon. They're not splitting invisible atoms to release the power of suns. They're not altering molecules to create new living species. They're not curing new diseases. There's no conditioned reflex that can get you to that state of cognition where humans are at. We're the ones in the lab coats, as you point out, with the notepad in our hand taking notes. We are the ones with the lab coats taking notes, about their behavior, and that they'll focus on just the most bizarre things. Do certain species kind of make tools? Yes. Do certain species communicate? Bees communicate. It is not tool making, it's not communication, it's not social organization that makes humans special. It is their mode of cognition, the way we think, that makes us special. We don't have to wait for consider, chimpanzee civilization has changed so much I can say meaningfully, human civilization has dramatically changed over the last 2 or 3 centuries, Michael. Has chimp or bonobo civilization, or gorilla.
That's how you pronounce it, bonobo?
Oh, I've heard it pronounced a couple of different ways, and who the hell cares how you pronounce it correctly?
Whoa! Put down the gun. This is a rock fight. Calm down.
I will give people slack on how they pronounce things like bonobo, bonobo, something like that. You get me close, and I know what you mean. That's fine. I hear the most bizarre things. If you've ever studied like ancient languages, you'll hear strange pronunciations of ancient authors and terms, and I've just grown numb to it, and so maybe that's it. If you want to pronounce it this way, pronounce it that way. It's not Julius Caesar, it's Julius Caesar, and the way it was supposed to be pronounced. It's not Mark Antony, it's Marcus Antonius. But anyway, so pronunciation and those are ridiculous issues. Anyway, human beings are obviously different. And when I mean obvious, I mean not that it's self-evident, but a clear observation of the world, anyone's obvious observation. Don't get me wrong, I love my pets, my dogs. I can really love them in a certain way. Not like I love human beings, obviously, but I can truly love animals. But it's not based on moral virtue. It's not based on, their intellectual character traits, obviously. But the point is that one can value life and understand that we are simply an evolved natural part of life on Earth, and still recognize that there's human differences. And that is exactly what they want to wipe out. What do they want to do? They want to treat us like an ant colony. They want to treat us, in effect, like animals who are determined creatures without a conceptual faculty. If they're the other part of it is a benevolent, we're just a natural part of the universe, motive in making this absurd statement. Part of it is actually an anti-human, and this is the ugly part, an anti-human thing. There's nothing different. In fact, if the difference is a pollution, the difference is an evil thing. The fact that we have technology, the industry, we're the enemies of the planet. if I hear another goddamn nature documentary that goes like this, the only natural enemy of the timber wolf is mankind. I am sick to death of it. As you point out, animals treat each other with force and violence all the time, even within their own species, mind you. What do they say? They say lions eat their own cubs. Male lions eat their own cubs. Okay, even within their species, they don't have reason. They don't have principles. They can't think like we do. They are run by conditioned reflex, and that is why their society changes so precious little over time. They have to wait for the great evolutionary, if I can put it in terms of evolutionary psychology, which is so hot.
What was that voice, Jim?
I'm sorry, what?
That voice, what was that just now? Evolution, like I don't like what's happening.
I'm probably in my own mind mocking these.
Who? That's what I want to know. Who?
Just the snobby scientific voice.
Okay. So we have a snobby scientific voice, and Jim is mocking it.
That's it.
All right.
Just sort of the caricature of it. Really, that I made.
And our favorite scientist, Megan Ribbons, does not have that voice.
No, I was definitely not channeling Dr. Ribbons there. No, not at all. Not at all. But the great advantage is that we can change our behavior in radical ways without waiting for physical evolution to make that possible. Animals have to wait for physical changes to adapt their nature to the new circumstances of the environment in which they face themselves. They have to wait for a mutation that happens to work out so that they physically change. That is a slow process of adapting to nature. We don't have to change our bodies at all. We come up with radically new solutions mentally so that we don't have to wait for evolution to tell us how to behave. We have a whole new, and all this stuff above the eyebrow. Look at this high forehead I have. Look at that high forehead you have. When you look at apes, it just curves right back over the brow line. It's all this thick thing here. And when you look at the skulls of hominids as they evolve, that's what's exploding. Whoop! Above our brow line is whoop.
Well, Jim, what's going on here, though? I mean, you can't just say we don't gain our intelligence because of the forehead. There's something going on.
What I'm doing is pointing out that they are evading a physical reality. You were pointing out the lobes of the brain.
Yes, but I want you to tell me, what is it? You got to tell me.
Talk about unscientific. This whole region of the brain is actually much bigger and more developed than in any other species. Most species don't even have it. Don't even have this aspect of the brain at all. And we as humans have this huge, evolved rather rapidly too, this huge thing here called our cerebellum, where we think. And
cerebrum, Jim, you can't mess it up.
Cerebrum, excuse me, forgive me. Persephone would probably correct both of our pronunciations on this. But in any event, again, goddamn pronunciation. Anyway, the point that I'm making is obviously they're missing everything that makes humans distinctive. Our art, our science, our sense of humor, our social interaction, the way we can change the way our society works. It's really only in the last couple of centuries that humans did away with slavery. If you go back far enough, we were sacrificing our young to appease the gods. If you go back far enough, we were eating our young like cannibals. No, humans can dramatically alter their behavior over time without waiting for evolution. Because we can think, we can come up with original thoughts. No matter what angle of empirical evidence you want to look at this in, these are unscientific claims that are motivated in part, at least dramatically, by an over hostility to everything that is uniquely man, to science, technology, and humans, destroying the planet, et cetera, et cetera. It's tied into that evil notion. It's anti-human, really. It's self-hatred. Humans are a species capable of self-hatred, as you point out, in a way that no other species is capable.
Well, you referenced, Jim, the cerebrum and more specifically the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex. There you go.
It's so, it actually has to be folded in, I believe. And this allows us to do things like this author is asking us to do, to reflect on the way we
Right.
view the world so that we can change the way we think, which, as far as we know, no other animal has the ability to self-reflect and alter its own conduct. It can respond to stimuli, it can respond to rewards and punishments, but it cannot reflect. And of course, this is all part of what Ayn Rand called the conceptual faculty. And she was really big on people, trying to undermine the conceptual faculty. She called it, I believe, an assault on the conceptual faculty. And
Well, that
that's
is
what
what
I
it's
thought
under
of when I
assault.
read this article, which is why I wanted to get it to you.
That is precisely what is under assault, is the conceptual faculty. You know, there's no doubt about it. The gruntings of a ape really are no different. No, there's no real difference between what we do and the gruntings of an ape. Now, I'm not going to wait for an ape to write a book denouncing apes as being no different than any other species. I'd be satisfied with a short monograph on the subject from our local ape population.
I don't think we have a local ape population, Jim.
In
Not
New
in Connecticut.
No, not in
I,
Connecticut.
I don't know what's happening in California.
Well, we
Greg
don't have,
Lewis,
but you
Lewis
notice
is
in
talking about
America,
sperm
we have,
whales. I don't know what's happening there. These people in the chat, they like go off on their own tangent and have conversations that have nothing to do with what's going on here. I think
we
they
rip
come
it in.
on and
We
they
keep
just
them
like,
ripping it.
it's like a social club for them, and we're just here to, I guess, talk to each other. Somebody in the audience, I think it was Greg Lewis, asked if I would ever put Persephone on screen. That is entirely up to Miss Persephone, Greg. That is not my decision. I would not just throw her up on the screen. She might not take too kindly to that. Although she looks lovely. I can see her every day. I can see her now. She doesn't look amused with the prospect. So Jim, over here in New York, the New York judge in the Luigi Mangione case, who is the guy who killed the healthcare guy, I think it was an insurance rep or some such thing, but he killed him. And the judge, and I want to talk about some other aspect of this that I think is sick, but the judge has tossed out the terrorism charges, and the defense is claiming double jeopardy implications because of the federal and state crimes. Now, as a prosecutor, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the whole thing. To me, let me just put it, I am not a fan of throwing, the guy committed first-degree murder, right? Depending on what the law states, I guess it's second-degree murder there, whatever. You shoot somebody like that in broad daylight, or you execute somebody, you should get life in prison, right? There shouldn't need to be these hate crime legislation, or, well, if we charge him as a terrorist, we can give him more time. Just give the freaking guy what he deserves. But so the judge threw out the terrorism. He said it didn't meet the criteria. So that's the first thing. What do you think of that? Did it meet the criteria for terrorism?
Actually, I am a critic of what the judge did in terms of analyzing the statute and the evidence. This guy clearly did mean to intimidate and send a message. This guy was picking someone he did not have a personal beef with. It wasn't even that insurance company that had ever denied him any insurance claims. And he was picking the CEO of this company to make a point, and stalking him and gunning him down in public in order to make a point. So in other words, if it turns on, was this guy trying to intimidate more, a group of people,
a broader scope of people,
broader
right?
scope. If that's what we mean by terrorism, and that's what the judge ruled on here, then I think we have more than enough evidence. Now, is it worth the federal prosecutors taking a writ, say, on appeal to say, no, the judge erred here. As a matter of law, this is sufficient evidence to go forward in a terrorism charge trial. But you're right. I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it, because the guy is charged with murder, and murder in such a way that he will be gone at least for the rest of his life. But layering on charges, double jeopardy and stuff like that, this ground has been plowed before by many a case. Yes, there can be parallel jurisdiction. The courts have gone over this in great detail, believe me. There can be parallel jurisdiction prosecutions. You cannot punish him for the same act more than once. I don't care if the United States government charges him with murder, and the state, the New York state charges him with murder, and he gets convicted for the murder. He can only be punished once. Now, being convicted in multiple jurisdictions is certainly possible. If they have some new charge, say some illegal possession of the firearm charge, you're right, that could be tacked on consecutively. But again, it's somewhat meaningless if the underlying charge itself is going to involve like life without parole, which it probably will for this guy. So how much do you need to, how many consecutive, I mean, I've been in that context where it's like the judge is adding up and you're getting to the point of 200 years, 300 years. You know, in California, we had child abuse laws which mandated consecutive sentencings. And boy, if you had multiple child victims, boy, those could add up in a big hurry, and you could get hundreds of years. And when you get to that point, what you're doing is you're making sure he doesn't get out
right
at that point.
Well, Jim, the Fifth Amendment says, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. Now, the problem is I get
the same crime 3 different ways. Let's say you stole a car.
Well, this is what I want to ask you.
Right.
This is my question, right? So I run up to Jim Valliant and I'm just tired of him siding with Mark. So I take my plane.
I knew this day would come.
Yeah. I take my plane over to San Diego. I run up to Jim Valliant. I punch him in the face. To your average person, this is a single act. I've walked up and I've punched Jim Valliant in his face, right? So, but I guess it all hinges on what the meaning of the word offense means. Does offense mean separate offenses that can be charged for the same act? For instance, they might charge me with assault. They could charge me with trespassing onto your property, with going over state lines for the intent of committing a crime. That can make it federal, but it's all the same. So when they say offense, when the founders said offense, were they talking about if you commit an act, you can only be tried for it once? Or were they saying whatever amount of offenses they can assign to you for that act, you can't be charged with the same offense more than once?
That's what they mean. The same action, the same transaction is often how they put it. The same act cannot be punished in multiple ways. And it's the one with the greatest penalty. It trumps out all the others, and the others are neutralized in effect. So you're driving a stolen car, a car you know to be stolen. That's a violation of the California Vehicle Code, driving a car you know to be stolen. It's also a violation of the Penal Code, receiving stolen property. Let's say in the course of that, I drive recklessly. We have 2, in effect, acts, and I can't be punished for both the receiving stolen property and the driving of the stolen car charge. I can only be punished for driving the stolen car and knowing possession of the stolen car one time. If, however, I drive recklessly, that's a different act. And so maybe I could charge it 3 different ways. Running a red light, driving 100 miles an hour. Well, if I have a superseding charge, reckless driving, I can't then be charged with running the red light, driving 100 miles, and reckless driving. That is one act. And it can be charged 6 different ways. I can throw the book at you with 14 different crimes, and a creative prosecutor can take one act and file 16 different charges on it. But that one act will get you one punishment according to the Constitution and the Supreme Court. It's the action that
they're talking about
to punishment for.
So it would be double jeopardy then to try him in both federal and state court.
Not to try him, to punish.
But he's put in jeopardy twice.
Not
what I mean, Jim, is this
precisely it.
Well, here's Jim. What if
punished once? If he's only punished once, I can convict him every which way in different jurisdictions for the same act with multiple charges for the same act. And it doesn't matter the different jurisdictions. It doesn't matter how many charges.
But Jim,
one act gets punished.
Isn't the whole point, though, Jim, or one of the points that they can't get more than one bite at the apple? That they can't just, like, for instance, if I get charged with a crime and Connecticut takes me to trial, And then I get found not guilty. And then they come up with a new witness. They can't then try me again.
That is true.
Because they'd be putting me in jeopardy. So what would be the difference if we assume, and I know you do, that the Fifth Amendment is incumbent upon the states via the 14th Amendment, right? So if I get charged in state court, right, and with the aforementioned assault on Jim Valliant, and I go to trial and I win, now the feds come in and charge me with the same thing. That would be double jeopardy. I don't know how it would.
It is effectively the same thing. You cannot be tried. You cannot be tried.
No,
twice.
but that's my point. Should they be allowed to get creative?
Not guilty makes it that not guilty prevents you from being tried for the same charge based on the same facts ever again.
Right, but so you're saying that, but see, that seems real fishy to me. If they come along and start saying, "Oh, but he also with that act committed this offense, and we can try him for that," it seems that that's a sneaky way to get around double jeopardy.
Well, if it is a different crime, but that's the thing. If it turns on precisely the same facts, it would be double jeopardy. That's how the courts look at it. If there's some new set of facts that adds to it and makes it a different crime in this federal jurisdiction, then you get in effect a second bite at it from a different angle altogether.
I guess, Jim, what I'm asking is, I want your take. Like, I know the law says they can do this. I know that the case law allows for them to do this. It's done all the time. But I'm asking you from an originalist perspective. If James Madison is on the show right now and we ask him, Mr. Madison, if this guy shoots the guy out in the street and the state tries him for murder and he's acquitted, can the feds then come in and say, well, it was also a hate crime, so we're going to try him for a hate crime? Would that be double jeopardy?
No, neither James is here. James Valliant or James Madison would think that the federal government had any right to engage in this criminal prosecution in the first place. In other words, there's a very specific list of crimes in Section 8, Article 1 that are the feds' business, and only those. Most federal criminal statutes are justified under a bizarre and incorrect understanding of the Commerce Clause.
Right.
I think I've said this on more than one occasion. Get this. Drug laws, kidnapping laws. How does the federal government get jurisdiction over those at all? Ordinary murder cases. How does the federal government get jurisdiction at all? Through the Commerce Clause. Now, James Madison would be absolutely astounded that the Commerce Clause would be used to justify drug laws or kidnapping laws. No, that is not within the federal government's power at all. So my answer that I think I would share with James Madison is a much more fundamental one. Most of the criminal apparatus of the federal government, most of its criminal law is simply unconstitutional. States are the ones that enforce nearly all criminal law. Now, there are a couple of exceptions: piracies on the high seas, counterfeiting, things like that. But apart from the very narrowly and specified, I mean, think about this too. If the Commerce Clause could encompass something like, let's say, the Federal Communications Commission, why would they need to specify the post office? You see,
they would need to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The mere inclusion of the post office tells me what the Commerce Clause, the sort of things that the Commerce Clause does not include, and or the counterfeiting clause.
Yeah, you wouldn't need to put that in there either.
That's exactly. If you need to specify counterfeiting, then what the hell are you doing thinking that the Commerce Clause can give you the power to do the equivalent in a dozen other areas? So no, what I would eliminate, people, I know there's a very, very unpopular view because most people think the federal government has an active role in prosecuting most ordinary crimes. And the feds, we don't get involved in crimes unless, always let the states handle. And 90% of the murders and kidnappings and thefts are prosecuted on the state and local level. On the other hand, they want to reserve the power to really come in and hit you hard. Well, that is not within this original constitutional scheme. They're not some backup to a failure in state criminal prosecution, although people have tried to do that. The real justification for federal involvement in law enforcement came about because of alcohol prohibition. We did not get the FBI until we needed a response to the organized crime that was the product of prohibiting alcohol by law. So no, most of what the FBI does, I think, is unconstitutional. Many of the agencies of the Department of Justice are unconstitutional in my mind. The Commerce Clause simply cannot justify most criminal jurisdiction that they have just asserted. And because of the growth in economic, believe it or not, it's this twisted view of the Commerce Clause and economic regulations but wait a minute here. I mean, think of it. Federal involvement in education is justified based on the Commerce Clause. If you'd asked James Madison, well, do you think that means the federal government can be involved in education? He would be aghast. I am certain he would be utterly aghast. That is not the system we set up. That is not the federalist system that we set up. That is the state's business, not the federal government's business. Keep your grubby hands off of normal law enforcement, federal government.
Jim, why
people will think I'm soft on crime, but
no, you're tough. You're tough on crime. Actually, so am I. When somebody actually violates someone's rights and is convicted, then I'm for being tough on them. But there's a couple things that I want to ask you now.
When someone actually dies and is intentionally killed, that is so serious. But the point is, it's the state's business. I don't care how serious the crime is.
So, Jim, in criminal law, we have mens rea and actus reus, right? Mens rea means guilty mind. You have to have the intent to commit a crime. Actus reus means you follow through on it, the guilty act. So, but one of the ways, there's two ways, at least here in Connecticut, where they circumvent intent. Intent is an element of an offense. One is through the felony murder statute. So for the people in the audience, the felony murder statute says if Jim and I go and commit a robbery, and that's my only intent, the only intent I have is to go commit a robbery. Unbeknownst to me, Jim has a plan to kill the people that we're robbing, and Jim kills them. I would be charged with felony murder because a person died during the commission of my felony. So that's how they get around the intent element there. Another way in Connecticut here that they get around it is with what they call the escalating continuum. So if two guys have a fight, and if all the evidence, everybody that knows anything about it testifies, no, the only plan was for them to fight. The only intent they could show was the person to fight. But suppose the person dies in the fight, they could actually argue that the person's intent changed in the course of the fight. So it went from just a fight to murder, even though there was no, ancillary evidence to the murder. Both of those cases, Jim, seem to me that they're just creative ways to circumvent intent.
I fully disagree. If you and I agree to do a robbery, we're already threatening death. We mean people to believe that they might die if they don't give us the money. People, when someone shoots back, then they get this. If one of the victims or witnesses to the crime shoots one of us in the course of the robbery, we are guilty. The survivor is the one guilty of the murder. Guess what? Robbery is naturally a deadly threat. When murder happens, when you do a crime,
it is, but
there's a natural.
But there's no intent, Jim. I understand it's a horrible offense. But there's no intent to kill.
Oh no, there's an intent to do a deadly threat. And when someone gets killed, let's say a bystander pulls out a weapon and kills someone accidentally, it's the robber's fault and it's murder. And I am going to be very strong about this. When you engage in robbery, you're engaged in an overt death threat. And if you happen not to have considered that, that's your problem. The natural and probable consequences of a robbery are that people will use deadly force, which they have every right to do in response. And when someone dies, it is the legal fault of the robbers. Full stop. If you engage in kidnapping or robbery, certain felonies that are inherently deadly dangerous, you have threatened death reasonably.
But you did not intend murder, Jim.
I don't give a hoot.
Okay. So you don't care. Okay. But then you agree with me.
An intent to commit robbery, if it truly is I think you'd have to really say armed robbery to make it a clear case, because some ordinary strong arm robberies don't threaten death.
Well, that's it. But even robbery, if I don't know, I might not know you're
robbery. No, you're a murderer. You are a If you pull out a gun and you don't intend to use it just to get money from people, and the bullets fly and someone dies, you're a murderer.
Jim, if I don't know you have that gun and we go to do a strong arm robbery and you pull out a gun and kill the guy, I'm still guilty of felony murder.
Yeah, we're engaged. Well, I would say that it should be fact sensitive, obviously. But if you're engaged in robbery, an armed robbery, and I know you're engaged, you're armed, that's a no-brainer, right?
No, I disagree 100%. I don't agree at all.
No.
If you hold on.
Wait.
No, wait. You can't wait. How do you? Who are you? You can't wait me.
No,
Jim.
When the gun gets pulled out, it is those who knowingly pulled out the gun are responsible when the bullets fly and someone dies.
Okay, then this is what they should do then. When the legislatures pass laws, get rid of the intent element.
No,
because you're circumventing intent. The person doesn't intend to kill anybody. If I don't intend to kill anybody and somebody else that I'm with kills them, that's how you circumvent
there are different
intent.
levels of intent.
I could specifically tell the guy before we go, I do not want you shooting anybody. I don't want you committing murder. If he does it during the course of a felony, I'm still guilty of felony murder.
And that's the way it ought to be.
That's fine, but you're still circumventing intent.
No, all I need is the intent to make the deadly threat, which you knew was a deadly threat.
But that's not the argument for felony murder. They don't
precisely it. There are certain crimes that are inherently deadly.
They say, but they don't say because there's an intent there, Jim. You're circumventing intent.
No. What they're saying is that this intent is enough to prove the malice of forethought because it's not intent to kill. Murder does not require. This is a major misconception people have. Murders do not require a specific intention to kill.
Sure, they do. They do. Absolutely. Murder. Absolutely, they do.
No. The concept of malice of forethought has been correctly over the last couple of centuries understood to mean things other than a specific intention to kill.
So hold on. Goodness. So then why the different degrees of murder? Why manslaughter? That all has to do with the intent of the person, Jim.
And then aggravate it from there. Absolutely. But the point is, all I need is the intention to do an inherently dangerous felony. And if someone dies, you're a murderer. I don't care what you planned or wanted to happen. Ditto residential burglary. I break into your home at night.
You've circumvented intent. I wonder how old, do you know, Jim, how old is felony murder concept? Do you know by any chance off the top of your head?
No, how old it is.
I want to find this out. Let me keep, Jim, keep talking. Go on, Jim, go on as you do. And I'll
rule. People who engage in rape, armed robbery, residential burglary, when the bullets fly and someone dies, that is the natural consequence of what they did intend to do. And they are responsible for the natural and probable consequences of their criminal intent, even if it did not include the specific intent to commit murder. It would be bizarre and immorally wrong to not charge the person with the natural effect that actually took place from their deadly threat. Armed robbery is a deadly threat. Rape is a deadly threat. Residential burglary can imply a hot prowl implies a deadly threat. When any crime that involves a reasonable chance that someone will die. In fact, when I stick a gun in the person's face, the 7-Eleven clerk's face, I'm threatening him with death. He can reasonably kill right now, me. He has every right to kill me when I pull out the gun. And guess what? I'm acting in self-defense. And
Jim, I don't disagree with that, Jim. What I disagree with,
who has the one who is responsible for that death.
So you're saying that when if one person goes along, he's going to drive the getaway car for a robbery, that all he knows is going to be a robbery. The person that actually commits the robbery does a murder as well. Are you saying that the person who drove that car intended to commit a murder?
Did he know that a robbery was going to take place?
That's not what I asked you. Did he intend? Does he intend for a murder to happen?
Oh, he may want the murder not to happen actively.
Okay, so then you are arguing then that intent is irrelevant.
The intent to commit murder is irrelevant if he has an intention to commit robbery, which is a deadly threat.
Okay.
The minute you make a deadly threat to someone else and someone responds with force and an innocent person gets killed, it is the person who made the deadly threat, even if he didn't want anyone to die. who is responsible for that death, for that homicide. Yes, sir.
I'm laughing, Jim, because Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand a fan club. Thank you for the blinding glimpse of the obvious today. It's a way to disincentivize participating in felonies. Thank you. I was really having a hard time with that one to figure out what it was really all about. I just thought they just wanted to be dicks about it. I don't know.
No, you know, there are a lot of criminals who don't, you know, most people who commit crimes that involve deadly threats really don't want anyone to die. A successful pulling off of your hot prowl res burg or your armed robbery or your rape is not to see someone die. Nonetheless, you have threatened the people, their lives in the process. The second that there is a natural and probable deadly threat on the table that you caused, any time the bullets start flying and people start dying, you are responsible for that homicide. Full stop.
I would differ if it is a.
You say you're tough on crime.
I am tough on crime. If somebody commits a murder, I think that should be it. Send them to prison the rest of their life. If somebody commits a robbery, I'm all for giving them lengthy sentences. Deeper with Diego says it's mind. I just want to say something. Hold on. I want to.
And they're not responsible for that.
Listen, but in law, there's different degrees of accountability and different degrees of responsibility.
All the facts.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is that an accomplice who had no intention of committing murder has no intent to commit murder. But I want to explain something to the audience, Jim. You're stressing me out now. Hold on. So Deeper with Diego is talking about that judging intent is mind reading, but it's really not, because intent can be gleaned based on actions. You don't actually have to get inside a person's head. You have to demonstrate that a person's actions indicate that they had the intent to commit a crime.
For example, the killing of Charlie Kirk. I did not have to wait for the evidence of this guy's text messages. I did not have to wait for his arrest. That I could draw a reasonable inference that he had an intention to kill, and to kill one person specific, and in fact that he was motivated by the guy, what the guy was saying. So all those things were reasonable inferences before the guy was ever arrested. And it is, Deeper with Diego. No, we can judge people based on their statements. We can judge people based on their actions. Now, the standard proof is pretty high in a criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt. I have to present, as a prosecutor, enough evidence to convince a unanimous jury that the evidence is such that you can be reasonably certain that someone had the intent in question. When it comes to the felony murder rule, the intention to threaten deadly force is enough to ascribe the homicide to the person.
Okay. Now, so Deeper with Diego says, if you can glean, Diego, stop using voice to text, because I know you mean glean. Intent based on actions. That's what Jim is saying. Just by doing an armed robbery, you can glean intent. That's not what Jim is saying.
I'm not.
He's saying that the person is responsible for the death, not that they intended. Not that they intended.
Whoever makes a deadly threat, even if they don't want it to come true, is responsible when bullets fly and someone's dies.
One of the things that they say, Jim, is if something is reasonably foreseeable, right? Yeah. And now, I actually can get on board with reasonably foreseeable, but that would mean that you have to demonstrate that element in any given trial. The felony murder, you don't actually have to demonstrate that. You don't have to demonstrate that it was reasonably foreseeable. You have to demonstrate an intent
to commit
the underlying offense.
That's
but
right.
You don't have to show that.
I should have to.
Oh, I disagree.
If there's a crime that reasonably threatens death, I'm responsible for any death that might occur.
But Jim, you even said yourself earlier that if there's no gun involved and it's a strong armed robbery, but then one of the parties has a weapon that the other's not privy to, he's still guilty. Well, he's still guilty of the murder.
If you're engaged in, look, I am responsible for everything that might reasonably occur in a robbery. This far, I will go with you. That is to say, if my partner happened to spring out a knife and stab the guy, well, wait, I was doing a robbery with this guy. is it really out of the bounds of consideration, since we are initiating
Wow,
force?
we are going so far outside of intent now. Intent now, mens rea
No,
doesn't
the
even
intent
matter
to
at this
commit a
point.
robbery is a threat of force, and in
But
fact,
it's
you
not
partner.
intent to commit murder.
No, it isn't. I don't
And
care.
it might not even have been reasonably foreseeable that a death would occur.
Oh, well, you and I have a different conception of what robbery is.
The overwhelming majority of robberies don't result in death.
Yeah, I don't have
Overwhelming majority don't result in death.
Yeah,
If you want to say somebody should be locked up forever for a robbery, okay, that's a different
well,
argument.
that's in part because most victims just go along because they don't want to be killed.
They do. They go along with it, but
Because
there's
they don't want to be
nonetheless.
killed, and they
So
receive the
okay,
threat as
but
a
then
deadly
on the
threat.
part of the person committing the robbery,
If
it's
someone's
reasonably,
robbing you in
it's
an
a
alley,
reasonably,
the reason why you comply with the robber and it doesn't end with
because you
death
don't.
is
But
because you're
that's
being
what he
threatened with
expects to
deadly force.
happen, Jim. All I'm listen. If you want to increase the penalty for robbery, I'm fine with that. I don't have an issue with it. But when you say that you have to intend to commit a specific act and then you circumvent that intention by putting into place a different law, you're doing exactly that. You're circumventing one of the elements of the
Absolutely not.
offense.
Absolutely not. No, we're saying that
What?
that intent was enough for you to bear the consequences, all of the consequences of what happened. That's what we're saying. No, it's weird. We can charge second-degree murder, for example, in some cases with drunk driving. If you have drunk driving priors, if you're really stoned out of your mind, you are engaged in an action which has the natural consequences of being a deadly threat to people. You cannot hide behind, well, I was drunk. That can be a kind of implied malice. And the concept of malice aforethought has been defined in several ways, but it's malice aforethought. It's not intention to kill aforethought.
I'm trying to read this. Hold on.
Yeah.
Somebody says we're very disgusting guys. I don't know. No, it was a mistake. All right. So we've solved this. I'm obviously right. Mark's at home agreeing with Jim because that's what they do, because they're both wrong frequently. Persephone is nodding with me. I can see her. She's pointing right now and saying, Michael, you are absolutely correct. No, Persephone's not doing that. Jim, what about this poor guy in Pennsylvania who lost the equity in his home? His home worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. During COVID, he missed paying a property tax for $14,000, and they now have taken the entire equity in his home for this. They say in the article that the courts have already ruled this is theft of equity, but they did it anyway. We have a president of the United States right now who thinks that you should be able to for private use. Most people accept eminent domain, that you should be able to take property for public use. Property rights are supposed to be sacrosanct, right? Like that is part of the foundation upon which this country is built, right?
Right.
But property rights are not secure.
No, they are not. In fact, the recognition of property rights which once was regarded as a sacred right up there with free speech and freedom of religious practice. Property rights are that fundamental to the framers and their understanding. They could not conceive of a world in which there could be free speech with no private property. Private property is the only way to implement all of your other rights. You see what the Supreme Court, as I've said many times, they divide up the Bill of Rights into separate and competing little discrete, corner cubby holes of rights that can be in conflict with one another. Your rights are in conflict with mine. We have different levels of scrutiny depending on the right involved. No, all of that is bullshit, and all of that has been made up by the Supreme Court, pulling it out of the thin blue sky, pulling it out of their ass. For just within the last century, they've made up all this crap about rights and different levels of scrutiny and rights being in conflict and all that other nonsense. Property rights are instrumental to our freedom of speech, to our freedom of religion, to our Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, papers, houses, and effects shall not be violated. In other words, your right to privacy and against criminal law enforcement is a right of your person, but also a right protecting your property. Property, life, liberty, and property are what cannot be taken without due process, according to the Fifth Amendment. So you got it right there in the Fourth and Fifth Amendments that property is absolutely essential. But then again, they've tossed out the contracts clause for having any meaning. State law can now violate contracts, the obligation of contracts left and right. No, what has happened is basically economic dictatorship has been given a green light by the Supreme Court through the Commerce Clause. Not only does the Commerce Clause allow them to engage in criminal law enforcement in ways that Madison would have been horrified at, or educating our kids at over the federal government, but it reaches this far. Your property is really not your property. And so every word in the Fifth Amendment, when it talks about the Takings Clause, has to be given meaning. You can't just pretend there aren't words there. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. In other words, it cannot be taken for private use. And that is precisely what both parties did. Donald Trump joins the lefty bandwagon that says the government can take private property for private use. And in this way, as in so many other ways, Donald Trump and his Republican minions have joined the socialist left in this economic dictatorship that they advocate. And the Supreme Court, which is really sad, decades ago, the Supreme Court went right along with the idea that private property could be taken for private use. In effect, scratching out, using a magic marker for public use, scratching those words right out of the Fifth Amendment as if they're no longer there. And furthermore, the Supreme Court is, in one way, did get their act together back in the 1990s when they developed the concept of regulatory takings. My law professor was key to all this, mind you. If they regulate your property, say change a zoning law, and 90% of the value goes away because of the zoning law change, do they have to compensate you? 50 years ago, they didn't. But if they take 2 inches of your front yard so that they can expand a sidewalk, then they have to compensate you because that 2 inches was physically taken, whereas 90% of the value of your property is destroyed by regulation and they don't have to. That's paradoxical, right? So the Supreme Court said, no, that's too bad. No, if the property value has been substantially taken by the regulation, that too is a taking. And so the government at that point has a choice, either get rid of the regulation or compensate each private property owner for the diminishment in this. It has to be most of the property value. Unfortunately, I would just say any measurable diminishment in the property value due to the regulation. I want the regulatory taking doctrine expanded. So while the Supreme Court was doing something smart by creating this new jurisprudence of regulatory takings, they did something really stupid. They ignored the plain words in the Fifth Amendment and said you could take private property for non-public uses.
Jim, I was told that your mic was down. I wish someone would have told me earlier, but because it was, I don't know why it reverted back, but it did. So I just turned it up. So now with the last,
did you get my regulatory takings tirade?
Yeah, no, everybody got all your tirades. Yeah,
okay, good.
No one's missed a Valiant tirade.
Good.
So the Trump administration, evidently Trump was heckled or something while he was out to dinner in Washington, D.C.
I saw that.
And the Trump administration is now talking about charging people like that with RICO violations. Now, of course, what they're saying is, they went into this big thing. No, we're talking about if it's organized. But of course, there was no evidence that this is what happened in this case. They switched the subject to if it's an organized, paid for kind of thing, and it's putting people in danger or some such thing. But it's all really just about somebody protesting Trump. Now, if this is on private property and those people are violating the property rights of the owner of the restaurant, I'm all for it. But RICO violations, racketeering, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah, well, I think these facts are particularly absurd in their application. I actually saw the video clip. There were these women who started, chanting complaints about, the genocide that's going on in Gaza with Israel, and that was their beef. But they chanted. Trump handled it pretty well. I mean, he just blew them off. But they were evicted from the restaurant. Case over, right? I mean, if I was legally there in the first place and all I did was to create a ruckus with my words, why are we even? I mean, talk about a statute that you want to talk about Constitution, RICO, racketeering and organized crime. How does that come into the Commerce Clause? Now you say, well, see, it's organized crime, so it goes across states and therefore affects commerce. And therefore, no, I don't buy the Commerce Clause interpretation that way. But assuming that they have their RICO laws, they have found, since they passed the RICO law, mind you, which was meant to go after organized crime, they have done a lot more than go after, Bulger or some mafia.
Oh, come on. You're telling me the government would go beyond what they've claimed
They
they did
are
something for?
constantly trying to find creative uses for that RICO statute, which was already ridiculously vague in the first place. And if it can be stretched to those dimensions, let me suggest we really have a constitutional problem with the RICO Act. But to do so when someone heckles you at a restaurant, Mr. Trump, come on, grow up.
Okay, so we have a question from the audience here. Do you think that if we freeze Michael's screen, Jim would continue talking the whole day without noticing?
There's a good chance there's actually a fair chance that I would just keep babbling on for hours without noticing. Yes.
It would be great content, though. That's the problem.
Brilliant, scintillating content.
Well, I didn't say brilliant. It depends what you're talking about. It depends on whether you're agreeing with me or not, and then we could figure the whole thing out. Please, people, by the way, remember to like this episode, share it from YouTube to your favorite social media platforms. And I got to tell you, the comments are way down on the channel. I need you guys to go in there and just comment away. I don't care if you say, look, Liebowitz is a jerk, Jim's a genius, whatever you want to say. I mean, even if you have to lie like that, that's fine. Just get in there and say some stuff. We need you to say some stuff. Okay. We have Race Jacobson says he wants to hear 12 hours of the Murray Rothbard voice.
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. Jim, give us the capitalist thought of the day. It's your responsibility because I said so.
Capitalism requires that we limit the government. It is critical that government not have these overwhelming powers that we've just looked at from a variety of angles, whether it's criminal regulations, economic regulations. The government needs to be constrained. Let me say, the government needs to be hogtied. The reason why we have laws is to protect us from one another. The reason why we have a constitution is to protect us from the government. And if the Constitution is not actively and aggressively used to strike down every time the government gets out of its limited and constrained and predefined roles under the Constitution, it is a threat to capitalism. Capitalism is a system that requires that the power of government be limited severely.
All right. So it's been suggested, and we actually did this before, but we stopped, but I'm going to do it again, to ask a question at the end of the show. My question is this for the audience. Please go to the comments and answer it. Is the felony murder statute a way for the government to circumvent the intent requirement for murder? So go to the comments, answer that question.
Or is the intent to commit an inherently dangerous felony?
Well, Jim, you're adding to my question?
Yeah.
You're poisoning the well?
I am poisoning the well.
What the hell?
Or is the intent to commit kidnapping, robbery, or rape sufficient to make someone liable for the deaths that will
That's not but no, because I want to know specifically about intent. That's what I want to know. I want to know if it's an attempt to circumvent intent.
Okay.
Jim, great capitalist thought. Great job being on the show today. Folks, remember, check out my podcast, The Rational Egoist. I should have a new episode up tomorrow. It'll be great interviewing a topic is going to be a psychological topic. Go check out the American Capitalist Party. Check out Jim Valliant. He's all over Facebook. He's at the Ayn Rand Center UK. He's a well-known author. Good-looking guy, tall, all around great. And please join us tomorrow. And in the words of the great, what the hell is his name? Oh, Mark Pellegrino. Please remember to check your premises. Goodbye.